Meanwhile, big story of the morning, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin remains hospitalized this morning at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center as the Pentagon is facing growing backlash over its failure to immediately disclose his hospital stay and emergency. Austin was admitted to the ICU on January 1st for, as of yet, unknown reasons. President Biden was not made aware that he was going to the hospital until January 4th or 5th, last Thursday. Congress and the press were finally notified 4 days later, January 5th, on Friday. The House Armed Services Committee released a bipartisan statement saying transparency is vitally important. Secretary Austin must provide additional details on his health and the decision-making process that occurred in the past week as soon as possible. Heritage Foundation Vice President of National Security and Foreign Policy and Deputy National Security Advisor under President Trump, Victoria Coates, is here. Victoria, you were an aide to former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. So I want to get your thoughts on this. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. Lloyd Austin did not disclose that he had to go to the hospital. His number two was on vacation. There's nobody running the Defense Department. Should he be fired for this?
Maria, good to see you, too. Happy primary season. It's really extraordinary. You know, if you know anything about the responsibilities of the Secretary of Defense, and he takes an oath to fulfill those duties and to protect the American people, you know, this is a really shocking dereliction of duty. And yes, I think the president almost has to fire him. This is really malpractice of anyone in the cabinet to make the president look this weak and out of touch, that he didn't even notice his Secretary of Defense was gone for 4 days. They apparently had no reason to communicate during that time. And it's also a huge process problem. Imagine if we had had a crisis in the Red Sea, for example. During that time period, the president wants to call an emergency National Security Council meeting, and he can't get either the Secretary of Defense or his deputy, who's in Puerto Rico, to attend. So this is a big mess. We need to get to the bottom of it.
Do you think he should resign? I mean, I'm talking to various, security folks, and they believe this is cause for resignation. What do you think?
I'm shocked he hasn't.
Right.
You know, apparently there was a congenial phone call with the president on Saturday, which is amazing to me that they'd even put that out. I mean, the president should be absolutely livid over this. And the secretary should offer to resign over this massive judgment failure. I mean, Secretary Rumsfeld actually tried to resign twice in 2004 over the Abu Ghraib situation, and President Bush refused to accept his resignation. But apparently Austin thinks there's absolutely nothing wrong here, and he has every right to this kind of privacy. I'm sorry, as Secretary of Defense, you don't.
That's right. And President Trump said just as much on Truth Social. He says failed Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin should be fired immediately for improper professional conduct and dereliction of duty. He's been missing for 1 week, and nobody, including his boss, crooked Joe Biden, writes Donald Trump, had a clue as to where he was or might be. He's also performed poorly. He talks about the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. And look at the aggression on China. So Trump is floating that, saying Biden needs to fire this guy. China, meanwhile, announced sanctions on 5 American defense companies yesterday. Victoria, what do you make of this? This is in response to U.S. sanctions and arms sales to Taiwan. It comes less than a week ahead of Taiwan's presidential elections that's being held this Saturday. We're all wondering, is the CCP going to get involved and interfere in Taiwan's election?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty interesting action. I mean, quite frankly, I don't think our defense companies should be doing business with China anyway. No. So it doesn't make me unhappy that they're going to cut that off. But what's really chilling about this from a market perspective, Maria, they're going to freeze any assets these companies have in China. And so that should be a warning to any American company who's active in China that the CCP can, at whatever for whatever reason, freeze their assets any time. And so why they would want to go into that market is beyond me. And I think China is very concerned about Taiwan's elections next week. I have one of my staff actually in Taipei observing the elections, and I think it's a really exciting moment to see the Chinese people, whose DNA is no different from those on the mainland, participating in a flourishing, vibrant democracy. It means it can happen.
Well, we'll see about that. We're also watching the CCP potential involvement in the U.S. election, by the way. John Ratcliffe has told me many times that he believes that the CCP interfered in the U.S. election in 2020 and 2022, and they're going to do it in 24.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they hate our democracy. They hate our system of government. And John's absolutely 100% correct there. And that's one of the many reasons we have to be really vigilant about our democracy. It's not so much the internal threats from people like me that President Biden seems so concerned about. We have plenty of enemies he should be keeping an eye on.
Right. And instead, he's attacking the people who want to put America first. That's basically his campaign speech. Victoria, you've got an op-ed out on foxnews.com titled "The Houthis Are a Foreign Terrorist Organization, and Here's What Blinken Biden Team Should Do About It." You write, the Biden administration should recognize what inaction against the Houthi could cost Americans here at home, and so redesignate the Houthis as both a FTO and a SDGT and take the necessary actions to deter them from further violence if they fail to do so. Voters may very well decide to hold them accountable. Victoria, is it the Houthis who have been attacking U.S. troops in the Middle East? What, 121 times? Have we responded at all?
We've barely responded, and we've made very clear through Secretary Austin's Department of Defense, we're not going to take any offensive action against the Houthi or their masters, the Iranians. And what's so deeply dangerous about this, Maria, is they're not just attacking American military assets, although they are doing that. They're attacking commercial shipping going up the Red Sea, where we have just a vast amount of the world's energy and food, among other things, terrifying, literally, those private companies who now have to send their cargoes around the Cape of Good Hope, around Africa, adding another 10 days, 2 weeks to their voyages. So this is going to start to snarl supply chains. It is the definition of terrorism. And if you put them back on the FTO and the SDG list, you're going to be able to take additional actions against them, particularly in terms of penalizing those who give them material support, which would be the Iranians. So this would be an opportunity for additional action against Tehran, which is causing all of this trouble, and would send, I think, a strong message to global commerce that the United States is serious.
Well, I don't understand why the inaction, no response whatsoever from this administration, Victoria. Same deal with China. We just did a whole story about the fact that this administration has directed border control to cut the number of questions required of Chinese nationals. So you've got Chinese nationals coming through the border illegally, along with all the others from 150 countries. And interestingly, they're supposed to be asked 40 questions. But for the Chinese nationals, they cut the number of questions down to 5. Why?
No, it makes no sense. I mean, the administration is just coddling all of these hostile regimes. There was some interesting reporting from Politico at the beginning of December that said they're not taking offensive actions against the Houthi because they're still hoping to get some kind of a peace deal between the Houthi and the Saudis, and that this would be a big diplomatic win for the president, also why they're not putting them back on the terrorist designation lists. So, I mean, it's the same thing now at the border, where all they care about is processing people as quickly as possible. So if that means reducing your vigilance over Chinese nationals so you can just process more people, well, that's fine with them. But it's a matter of time before one of these individuals who's getting through, these loopholes at the border decides to do something violent and hostile to the United States. And that's what I think we're all waiting for.
And we're wondering if they're being directed to do just that. By the way, this is exactly the kind of treatment that the CCP will pay millions for.
Oh, of course. And I mean, they have in this case. I mean, obviously, a ton of money has flowed rather to the Biden family. Right. And, now they get special treatment. Amazing.
Unbelievable. Wow. Victoria, good to talk with you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.